Good morning and welcome to our Travel Chat webinar sponsored by Midwest Living. Today's webinar features guest speaker Tori Emerson Barnes, Executive Vice President of Public Affairs and Policy at the U.S. Travel Association. She will discuss the impact of coronavirus pandemic on travel and tourism and the financial relief that is available through the recently passed CARES Act. Tori will focus on the programs that offer assistance for Ohio's DMOs and travel businesses, how to access this relief, and what provisions U.S. Travel is advocating for in future legislation. You'll also hear an industry update from Ohio Travel Association Executive Director Melinda Huntley. Before we start, we will go through a few housekeeping items. Everyone's audio will be muted throughout the webinar. If you have questions for either Tori or Melinda that you haven't already submitted ahead of time, please find and click on the chat button at the bottom of your screen and ask them there. We will do our best to answer as many questions as possible and will post the remainder of your questions on our website. Additionally, you will have access to our speaker's individual email at the end of the presentation to reach out for more information. Presentation materials from this webinar will be made available to you via email and on the OTA website before the end of the week. With that, I'll turn things over to Melinda with an industry update.
Good morning, everyone. I'm hoping you all are well, and I just want to take this time to say how grateful I am to each and every one of you, particularly all of you that have been reaching out with ideas or thoughts or just to tell your story. That is so important as both the Ohio Travel Association and U.S. Travel Association moves forward with their work. To date, the latest, and we kind of expected a new report probably today. Traveler spending in Ohio is down $492 million. That is to date as of April, I believe it's 4th. That is an 81% loss year over year. And although that, is not good news, there is good news in that we are now moving kind of into a phase where we are looking at how can we best leverage travel as a recovery mechanism. And this week we sent you to a link for a plan that has been developed by the Ohio Travel Association and all of its partners, particularly industry surveys with close to 200 of you, that is looking at other measures we can do. What can we do in the future? This plan is online, and I will send you the link to that plan in an email following the webinar. But the other thing we want you to know is that we are starting to take this plan kind of, I'm doing air quotes right now, out into the community. We will be starting up with a Zoom call with Akron stakeholders on Friday. And then we will be offering that in the future so that you can host us coming in and talking to your partners about what can we do? How can we move forward? Because it will take all of us. It will take federal, it will take state, and it will take local champions to make things happen. The other thing I want to mention is that we have been working with the Ohio campground owners and the Lieutenant Governor's office. We are hoping to have a reversal on the opening of campgrounds for those folks who own their RVs and use these campgrounds as a second home, or they're snowbirds and they're trying to get back home and they're not able to get to their home because they actually live in these self-contained RVs. We had a conversation with the Lieutenant Governor's office on Friday. It was pretty well received, and we are hoping to see a change there to allow some of these Ohioans to return back to the state. On the front, you will also see our ohiotravel.org. That is our website. I really suggest going to that website if you haven't already. And if you just click on the photo of the lighthouse, it will take you straight to our COVID page. One thing I want to bring your attention to is the daily updates on that page. We are posting everything we know that we find out in real time. So that is a really good summary of what's happening on a day-to-day basis. So I also want to thank Midwest Living for all of their support over the years, but particularly right now in allowing us to bring this information to you. And at this time, I want to introduce Tori Barnes, who is the Executive Vice President of Public Affairs Policy at U.S. Travel Association. They are doing a fantastic job at the federal level. I have worked with U.S. Travel Association for many, many years, and I can't speak highly enough for the efforts that they're doing. And I also want to say, you know, it's all roads lead to Ohio, right, Tori? Because Tori actually attended Miami University. So she has roots in Ohio as well. And at this point, I'm going to turn things over to Tori.
Yes, I did. And thanks so much, Melinda. It feels like just yesterday and also like 10 years ago that we were there last summer enjoying your hospitality in Ohio. And I wish we were able to do that again right now. And I look forward to being able to get out there again, hopefully in the nearer term. And thanks, you know, it's so good to be talking to all of you. You know, I wanted to give you an update on where we stand with regard to the coronavirus outbreak, the current economic relief situation, and what our current asks at the federal level are right now, and then also some recovery strategies as we move forward. So the next slide. So from the onset of the outbreak, you know, we've been in regular contact with the public health authorities, with key governmental officials, the White House, the President's Coronavirus Task Force, to ensure that, you know, we are able to keep folks up to date on the latest health and travel guidance throughout this process. And we also work really closely with tourism economics on the economic impact that you can see here on this slide, and how it is impacting our industry. And I have to say, you know, this shows a $910 billion economic impact, with the loss of 5.9 million jobs, all within the travel industry alone, which is 7 times the impact of 9/11. I actually got some new data back early this morning, which we haven't been able to incorporate here, but it actually has further degraded since this update, and this was just a couple weeks old. So, you know, make sure that we get you all the latest details of the impact that we have. But, you know, it's been important for us to demonstrate how much our industry is feeling the pain, and so that Congress can understand that this continued devastation that our industry is experiencing means that we need real relief now. So we've also been compiling, along with this data, state level economic data, and it won't surprise you at all to learn that the impact in Ohio has been devastating, as Melinda just noted. You know, for the week ending April 4th, we had the travel spending in Ohio was down by 492 million compared to the same week last year, which is an 81% decline. I think those numbers sound similar to what Melinda noted. And for the past 3 weeks, Ohio spending has just, you know, been further decimated. And then, other than the recent data, we also have the Center for Exhibition Industry Research data, which shows a predicted loss between 14 billion and 22 billion to the U.S. economy due to trade show and event cancellations alone. And this is the kind of data that we've been referencing frequently in our communications with the administration, with Treasury and the Small Business Administration, and of course, you know, with our champions in Congress. We've also, throughout this process, led many industry sign-on letters, one with over 6,000 travel businesses signed on. I appreciate it. I know that you all did participate in that as well. And we've activated, you know, travel workers to send over 13,000 action alerts around the first CARES bill, just showing how this is impacting, you know, our industry. So, you know, again, thank you for those of you who activated on that. I think we definitely have additional activations that are coming at you, because I think that the larger our voice is, the more impact that we can demonstrate, you know, and compel Congress to help with our industry. The next slide. I'm just going to talk now through a little bit about the CARES Act, and I'm sure you all have started to dig in on this as well. But obviously the CARES Act passed, you know, it was about 2.5 weeks ago. Quite frankly, it feels like it was 2.5 years ago. It just the way time is moving right now. But this $2 trillion package does include major provisions that we asked for, although obviously there were things that were not included. So a high level rundown in the bill for small travel businesses, self-employed individuals, and 501c3 nonprofits, 377 billion in enhanced and expedited small business administration loans. You know, those have already started to be made available through the banks. And those are the PPP loans, which will provide some loan forgiveness. And we're working hard to expand the eligibility for the Paycheck Protection Program. Treasury also has just been putting out new guidance over the last few days on business affiliation rules for the PPP applicants, as well as other information on how borrowers could calculate their payroll costs and the number of employees for those loans. In addition, there's also the $454 billion through the Exchange Stabilization Fund. And there's broad eligibility under this program. It gives, you know, the impacted businesses, you know, a liquidity lifeline. But we're still learning more about this program and the rules that Treasury is putting out, and we're highly engaged in that process. So, you know, we've seen some additional guidance from the Federal Reserve. They are establishing a new municipal bond facility, which will provide funding for states, cities, and counties who had suffered from lost tax revenue. But the details of that are still forthcoming. They've also provided additional clarification on the Main Street Lending Program and primary and second market corporate credit facilities. We are submitting a letter to Treasury today to get some more clarity on that program as well. And then this is the kind of information that we're adding to our website on sort of all of these programs. I know Melinda's been sharing this information down to all of you, but you know, if you'd like to receive these directly, you know, please also feel free to reach out and we can make sure to add you to our distributions. We are updating this in real time, so each time these regulations are coming out, which again is frequently, we got a couple from Treasury yesterday, we are updating our website with this new information. There's also some important tax law changes to help affected businesses, such as the deferral of tax liability at large, the creation of an employee retention tax credit, and delayed estimated quarterly tax payments and filing deadlines. And then it's also important to note that for businesses that may have you know, net operating losses this year, there is a provision that allows you to carry back those losses over the last 5 years and pull forward taxes you may have already paid into this year to help give you more capital. And then it also provides for $10 billion in airport grants to support vital operations, and then $5 billion for community development block grants, and another $1.5 billion for economic development and administration grants. Also important to note that the Act includes an extension of the Real ID deadline to October 1, 2020. So obviously that's, while not a financial help for any of our businesses, you know, it is an important point so that once we do get folks moving back, again, that they're not worried about having their Real ID and having to go to the DMV to get that. So, you know, we're going to continue to work with DHS to ensure that that probably gets pushed out even further as we are, you know, expecting a long recovery. So let me move now to our current asks because, you know, there is a lot more work to be done. We need some technical corrections to the CARES Act. We've already had several requests for the next relief bill. And then we're really focused on prioritizing what we can do regulatorily as well. So, you know, the following changes, and this might be a new slide. Yeah, okay. So these are some of the high-level requests that we're making right now. On the regulatory side, these are things that we feel that the Treasury and SBA didn't necessarily follow congressional intent. So, you know, on the PPP loan program, obviously with our businesses being as decimated, not having customers for some period of time, and therefore no revenue, we think that the 75-25% ratio for loan proceeds under the PPP should be modified to a 50-50 allocation to account for debt services. So right now, the way the regulations came out, 75% of the loan forgiveness is tied directly to employee retention, and only 25% for other costs like rent and or mortgage and other fixed costs that obviously our businesses need to be able to continue to have a business and eventually bring employees back or to keep them on. So we think that Treasury needs to make this change to allow for more of the money to the loan dollars to be able to use for fixed costs. We also think that currently the forgiveness in the loan is tied to, again, keeping employees on or bringing them back, and we think there should be some more flexibility. So let's say your business doesn't open for another 4 or 5 weeks, and then you bring employees back on. We think that you should be able to still apply for the loan now, get the money to use for fixed costs, and then be able to have the loan forgiveness kick in once you bring the employees back on. Right now, you would have to hire folks back within 10 days, and we think that it doesn't make sense for our businesses, again, where we have no customers. And then we would also, advise that Treasury should give more clear eligibility and borrower guidance for certain industries like ours, in particular in the hotel and franchise segments where it's unclear for if you have under 500 employees, if you're able, depending on your ownership structure, to be able to take advantage of the PPP loan. And then on the legislative side, I'm sure you all have heard that there's a call to replenish the PPP funds right now, because it is in fact true that they're close to running out of the $350 billion or close-ish. We agree that we need to replenish those dollars. We would say more in the $600 billion level, but that there's some other structural changes that are really necessary to make the program work for our industry. And in particular, that includes increasing the maximum loan to 8 months of covered costs. We think that, again, that the loan should be able to cover both payroll and operational expenses, so that folks have, a business to return to after we're through this health crisis. We would also amend the period for loan forgiveness under the PPP to December 31st, 2020. And we just think that June 30th is not a realistic, with some states still having shelter-in-place orders anticipated through June or into June. And so, the rate of demand for business operations to return is unclear at this moment. And then obviously you've heard us talk about this, and Melinda's been a great champion and as well on the need for the eligibility of 501c6 nonprofits to be able to tap into the PPP funds. We're also arguing for some of the other DMOs that have a different structure outside of the 501c6 to also be included in the PPP. So some are structured as a 501c4 or for the quasi-governmental organizations. We absolutely believe that access to these loans is necessary. We're working on a letter right now, a dear colleague in the House, which we'll make sure Melinda gets to all of you. We're asking for folks to reach out to members of Congress to sign on to encourage the leadership to include 501c6 and other DMOs into and state associations into the PPP. And so, again, we've been really highlighting the fact that DMOs across the country, and obviously in Ohio specifically, are able to help with the recovery. It will be so necessary for our industry to be part of the recovery once we get there, and that's why we really need to be able to take advantage of these loans that have the forgivability protection in there. So we'll make sure that you receive the link today. They are asking for members of Congress to sign on by the end of today. So it's just a 2-minute link. It's quite easy to send a note to your your congressperson through our link. So we'll make sure that that Melinda gets that out to you all. Also, you know, we continue to stay in contact with Champions on the Hill and other key congressmen and senators to make sure that our priorities are engaged in the next round of legislation. I know I have a call today with Senator Portman's chief of staff, and we've been reaching out to others within the Ohio delegation that are such great champions and well respected with leadership in Congress. So you guys have a great team there of legislators, and we just continue, you know, urge you to reach out to them as well. I'm going to touch next on next slide on sort of the recovery strategies on the federal, state, and local levels. You know, as soon as it's time for us, we will pivot to recovery and getting back to work on all of our policy priorities to grow travel. You know, as far as a timeline for recovery with things so in flux, we obviously can't predict when all of this will end and when things will be back to normal, but we know that it won't be like just flipping a switch to get back on. It will be a gradual recovery, likely very much to differ by region and by state and city. And we do know that recovery, you know, from a disease-related crisis can take 12, 16, 18 months. And we will, you know, again, I got some new data that we just received this morning that is going to help us to inform. One of the things that we're working on is how we can use that data to really to bring folks to understand how important our leadership is within the efforts going on in the government to get back to normal as fast as we can. Because when travel thrives, so does America. And I really, truly believe that. I think it's been made explicitly clear to others just how critical our industry is. And that's been one of the biggest messaging points, you know, within the last few weeks, is that drawing on the connection between travel and tourism and the downstream impact, the loss that travel can have on so many sectors of the economy is really significant. And when travel suffers, the impact does resonate, and it spreads through cities and regions and states and beyond other industries and our entire supply chain. And we really believe that travel can be a driving force for recovery from all of this. And the message that we want to encourage all travel businesses and workers is to be, you know, sharing right now is that we will wait for the official word for the government and health officials, and we'll signal the beginning of the recovery process. Building our industry back up and making it stronger and being ready to meet the pent-up travel demand will be integral to getting our country back on its feet. And of course, our partnerships, you know, with others across the industry, like the Ohio Travel Association, will be critical to this because our industry is more united than ever before. You know, we've been speaking with one voice to ensure that the travel industry comes back stronger. And, you know, and quite frankly, we really believe that it's imperative that we also have one sort of protocol that we're working from as well. We're leading a discussion with some of the corporate CEOs within our industry over the next week, as well as some of the destinations to talk through, you know, what are the right protocols for folks to get back out there so that we have one approach that makes the traveling public comfortable and confident in the way that they are able to move about, so that we can get back to, you know, the heart and soul of our country, which is to travel around and see all of the great things that there are in particular in Ohio. So, you know, thank you so much for everything that you all have been doing to show how critical our industry is. Your voice is being heard. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you all might have or address anything, Melinda, that you'd like me to, if I've left anything out.
Thank you, Tori. And thank you for all your work. And I will say, I've been really impressed with the way that Ohio businesses have rallied. And when we've gotten the call, so many of you have responded with the last effort with the CARES Act. The number of Ohio businesses that were represented in the sign-on letter was really overwhelming. So I want to thank you for that. I do have a couple questions. The first one that came in, could you offer a suggestion for a 501c6 DMO or CBD that was already approved for funding using the other category on the application, and they have the money in the bank? Should they sit on it, use it, and ask for forgiveness later? Should they give it back? Or should they apply again even when 501c6s are officially approved? And a similar version of this question has been coming in elsewhere from folks who are saying their bank's telling them they're not eligible, but other CVBs are getting the money.
And this is for the PPP loan, or is it possible that they applied for the disaster loan?
I believe it's a PPP. If I am wrong, please. Oh, PPP.
Okay.
PPP.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, this is a question we've had. We've definitely had conflicting responses from Treasury and SBA. I know that there was an effort when I talked to Treasury. They wanted to see if there was a way that they could, administratively include 501c6 organizations. They felt that they needed congressional intent because of congressional intent, that they needed to go back and have a statutory fix. I'm happy to ask them again since we're reaching out again today. I don't know what to say if they were actually approved for the PPP. It may be that the lender identified them as being in critical need and therefore, gave them the money, assuming, perhaps that based on the structure that they should be eligible. So let me try to get an answer on that for
Okay.
you all. I have heard this one before as well. I just want, the 501c6s are eligible for the disaster loans, the EIDL loan. So I just wanted to be sure in the event that someone has, because this is another question we often get, if someone's applied for the EIDL loan and is waiting to find out if we will eventually get 501c6 organizations into the PPP, should they go ahead and keep the EIDL loan? And my argument would be yes, you can use the EIDL loan for different costs than the PPP loan. And you could also refinance that loan if they decided you could only take one loan.
Perfect. That was one of the other questions that came in, was what to do if they had already applied. So any thoughts on what to expect some of the travel protocols may be? Have you heard any inklings of that, Tori?
Yeah, so we have actually been reached, both Congress and quite frankly, the administration's reached out to us to ask for how best to kind of get America moving again. And that's something that we're working on. I don't really have anything that I can share at this time, but we are working with some of the bigger organizations as well, on kind of what we're seeing throughout the world right now and other destinations. And we will be trying to put something together in the short term. But it's, I think the data, some of the data that we've seen shows that there's going to be a greater confidence in folks to get back out there once we see more testing available. Obviously, once the vaccine's available, but that one's pretty obvious. But also, if you couple, public health officials with, saying that, there are protocols in place, and we see from some of the pharmaceutical companies medications that can mitigate some of the negative impacts of COVID. I would equate it to, kind of like a Tamiflu for the flu, that when you see those two things together, that, more than about 60% of folks would be more inclined to get out and travel within the next 3 months. And so, we're working on trying to help be a leader in those protocols so that we can be a part of that confidence booster.
And from a statewide perspective, just during yesterday's press conference with the governor, we started to get a little more clues as to what it may look like. Obviously, every business is going to have to abide by the personal distancing. They also talked about having masks, supplies of masks available for your workers and others, as well as bumping up the disinfecting protocol. One of the questions from the reporters were, well, that's all good, but there is little supply right now. So that is one thing I think we are going to have to look at. How do we get the businesses the supplies they're going to need to be able to open up when we get the all clear?
Yeah, no, that's a good, that's a good point. And, obviously your governor's had, some really good, has made some really good comments and processes throughout this pandemic. So, I think that you're right. I think the governors at large are going to be, having a lot of their views. And I think that's why, when we start to see things open up, it will be in this sort of more regional area, to your point, on where the actual, necessary equipment and medications and processes can actually be implemented. So, happy to work with you all on that as well.
That's great. Another question came in, someone who had applied for EIDL, but has not had any response.
So we are hearing this a fair amount as well. We know that the SBA has been absolutely overwhelmed. In all honesty, they were understaffed to begin with. So, I would advise reaching back out. And if, there have been some instances where I have flagged for the deputy chief of staff at SBA, some folks that have not been not gotten responses, and I'm happy to reach out if there's a handful of folks that need follow up.
Thank you. We will get you that information. Can you talk a little bit about some of the emergency relief options for larger businesses? A lot of attention has been paid to smaller businesses, but there are an awful lot, including the several in Ohio, who are major businesses that are shut down and just completely devastated. So what options are out there for them?
Sure. So within the stabilization fund through Treasury, the Exchange Stabilization Fund, there's $454 billion, and within that is not only the Main Street lending, but also the Federal Reserve is doing financial assistance as well. The application procedures for that are forthcoming. They've started to put out some more some guidance on the lending capabilities through financial institutions, and the additional application procedures will be provided by a bank, and that is coming soon. So we will continue to push on Treasury. I think I noted that we were sending some additional clarifying questions up to Treasury today. Included in that as well is some recommendations for what they do on this bigger stabilization fund. We have been calling for them to create some of the loan forgiveness options that were included in PPP. In that, we're concerned right now as well that some of the credit rating issues to be able to be eligible, and some of the strings that might be attached to the stabilization fund will prove too difficult for our businesses to be able to get the help that they need. So we've been pushing on them as well. So we hope that will be available soon, and we'll circle back after we reach out to them today.
That's great. Thanks. Another question we had is, when folks talk to federal or state elected officials, often the power of tourism isn't always embraced. What recommendations on messaging, and you kind of touched on it before, but what recommendations on messaging do you suggest that seem to have worked in your recent efforts?
Sure. So I think that the continued degradation of our economic of the economy, and especially how bad it is within the travel industry, helps to demonstrate, how critical we are. When you start to see that, 2/3 of the jobs that have been lost have been in the travel industry, and how the lack of flow of commerce, has crippled us. I think that or the country. I think that they're able to see that. So, we started with thinking we were going to look at, losing 4.6 million jobs, and then it was 5.9 million jobs, and now it's looking more like 7 million jobs just in our industry, just in the first 2 quarters. And I think that when I talk to them about elected officials about that, that they see, oh my goodness, this is really bad, especially if you look at how many folks are filing for unemployment, and that hotels are closed, and destinations aren't hosting people, and convention centers have been closed from the beginning, that we started canceling meetings and events. And that's another important part of our industry that is going to have an even more difficult time coming back online, as we probably aren't moving immediately to large gatherings. So I think that drawing that picture, showing the data, or highlighting the data for them, but also the stories. I mean, I think you all have these stories from your local communities and how it's impacting you all. And I think, I've many times been, in my conversations with elected officials and their staff, they're kind of in shock when they hear about what our industry is dealing with. And I think being as open and candid as possible is the best way.
Thank you. And one of the things that I hear you say, and one thing that we've talked about since the beginning of this, is to talk about it in terms of travel. Yes, many of our businesses, it's about tourism, but honestly, what we're experiencing right now is just the inability to travel. And that is more all-encompassing. And that message seems to resonate a little bit more. There's another question, I'm just going to read it verbatim because it's kind of long, that they want clarification on what you mentioned about wanting to extend the 8 weeks consecutive requirement for organizations that currently are qualified to receive the funds. Does the 8 weeks start when the money hits the business's account, or 8 weeks from when they begin to use the funds? So in other words, can a business hold those funds in a separate account and use them for 8 consecutive weeks at a later date? Or do they have to start spending it right away?
Yeah, they have to start within 10 days. And so we are recommending that not be the case, because, as you know, and this has been the point that we've made to Treasury and to Congress, is that if you're not expecting to open your business for another 4 weeks,
right,
and the forgivability of the loan is tied to employee retention, then why are you going to bring, if you have all of these fixed costs, why are you going, and there's a robust unemployment insurance option, why are you going to bring back your employee to pay them to not do any work when you have all of these other debts accruing? You should be able to pay the other costs and then bring the employee back when you return to work. So that's one of the things that we're asking for them to change.
Okay, great. Another question's come in. Has any research been done relating to whether or not the senior market will be traveling this year? Have you seen any research at all about traveler sentiment related to the senior population? Just someone's shouting out to see if you've seen anything out there.
You know what, I had a conversation about millennials, because I was asking some data that I saw. I was curious if it was broken out by different age ranges, in particular, because I had noted that someone who works for me was talking about flying somewhere in June. I was interested by that. But we do have a ton of data on our website at ustravel.org/relief resources. And we have on Thursdays a pretty robust set of data that highlights tourism economics, Longwoods, Adara, MMGY, so a whole bunch of different survey work and traveler sentiment. I'm not sure if there's something specific to seniors in there, but we can absolutely take a look and get back to you on that. Off the top of my head, I can't think of what I've seen on there, but I'm sure we have it.
I haven't either, not that specific, but what we will do is give you all the link that Tori is talking about. Make sure you have access to those resources as well. Are there any other questions? Last call for questions. Okay, seeing none, I want to thank Tori for her work. She has been tirelessly leading this effort with her team at US Travel since this began. And so I really, really want to thank you for everything you've done for the businesses, for our industry. And we will stand ready when you need our business's help. I think one of the messages that's really important to convey is, you know, look, they are talking to these elected officials, but those elected officials are more likely to listen and act if they're hearing from their constituents. So that is why when you see us go out with an action alert, if you see me talking about, we need your stories, that is why. Because when we are talking with elected officials, they need to hear what's happening on the ground, and you all are the ones who have those stories to share. So thank you again, Tori.
Thank you, Melinda, and thank you for your partnership. You all activate so quickly and do such great work. It's so great to have your important voice leading the charge in Ohio, and really appreciate again the partnership and look forward to working with you all. We will get through this, and we just can't thank you enough for all the work that you do. So thank you.
You're welcome. All right, I want to once again thank Midwest Living for being a sponsor, for giving us the ability, because like you all, we are also 501c6 and are tightening the belt, but Midwest Living has made it available to us to be able to come to you and to offer you the information. We will also, please, if you have any thoughts, if you want to hear from a speaker, let us know. And we will be sending you a follow-up email with information, all the links that were discussed, as well as a summary of the Q&A. Next week, join us for a deep dive into some of the industry research that's occurring, and we will have our friend Amir on from Longwoods International, and that will be on April 22nd at 10 a.m. So thank you very much for participating. And Kelly, do you have anything else you need to add?
No, I think that's it. We covered it all.
Okay, great. Thanks all.
Thank you.